Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for your preparation and responsiveness to emails and cooperation, and thank you throughout this whole process. Thank you. I want to make one note on our agenda. Please add to your agendas that there will be or make a mental note that we will take a official vote on the technology fee decrease following the discussion of the technology fee. As well, I would ask that we all refrain from looking at our phones during the meeting and concentrate and be present. Moving forward, please return your binders, your Student Fee Board binders, to the Silk office on the 3rd floor. I will send out an email reminder about that, but please return your binders. As well, I just wanted to say that following this meeting, a letter will be drafted summarizing our discussions, our votes, and you know, the process of this year's Student Fee Board will be drafted and delivered to President Cockett with our decision in the form of a recommendation. And I wanted to ask Sammy to just speak for a moment about some possible changes to fees and tuition.
Okay. Thank you. So the Utah System of Higher Education, or we call them USU, is looking at potentially changing how fees currently are constituted, and they have asked each institution to review their current fees and look at making college more affordable, and overall just looking more into each fee and scrutinizing it more. So that is something the university, President Cockett, and others have been looking at, and I guess closely examining each of our fees. So in the next year or two, you might see some policy changes pertaining to fees. Like there's been things like reviewing fees every 5 years and seeing if there's still a need for them. You know, some fees start with one type of history, and we forget why they're still there after 10 years, but you know, still being collected. So things like that, just looking at overall affordability, and also looking at things that students need that are currently supported through fees that could potentially be transitioned to tuition. Like if you are fully funding a library through a fee, you might want to put that onto tuition. So there's been several of those changes coming. So be aware of that, and some of the things we look at on fees might look different in a year or two.
Now we'll hear from Dr. Morales about the university executive's recommendations.
See, Dexton knows the answers. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lucas, for some time to talk about my discussion with the University Executive Committee about the proposed fee changes that the Student Fee Board discussed last week. For those of you who are not aware of the makeup of the Executive Committee of the university, this is the most senior executive or administrative committee at the university. It's chaired by President Cockett, so it's the president's board, if you will. And sitting on that executive committee are all of the deans of the 8 colleges, as well as all of the vice presidents that oversee divisions at the university. We also have other chief or executive officers, including the chief information officer, the chief audit officer, and the vice president and general counsel of legal affairs all sit on that committee. And as you know, per fee policy, student fee policy, I am required to bring any recommended changes to the executive committee, not for them to vote, but there's actually two expectations that we have of the executive committee. One is that they provide this board with their input regarding each of the proposed changes to fees or new fees, if that happens to be the case. So the reason that input is important from this body is that they can see other areas of the university, in particular their respective areas of responsibility. They can see within those areas to see if there might be something that would impact one of the proposed changes that this board is considering. For example, in years past, quite a few years past, we were proposing a fee change, an increase to one fee, and a particular dean said, you know what, I've got a better way to address that. He had been thinking about that particular issue, and he said, let's do it this way, and he had some money set aside. So in the end, this board didn't have to push that increase forward, but we're able to address it in that other fashion. So that's why that's why it's important for the executive committee to have input, to review these proposed changes and to have some input. The other thing they do is if in a given year there are multiple fee increases, decreases, new fees, what have you, we do ask the executive committee to provide us a non-prioritized list of sort of what fees they might support, right? Again, this is not to influence the decisions that you make, but just so that you have an idea, we have an idea as a fee board, where the senior administration sits with respect to the proposed changes. So as per student policy, student fee board policy, I'd made that presentation this morning at the executive committee meeting, and I presented the two proposed changes. First of all, I presented the Ark Fee Increase, and at the last meeting, as we were discussing, of course, I take notes so that I can represent as accurately as possible the discussion that happened here. And I also take a record of the straw poll, the vote that we took, and I share that information with the executive committee members, after which I then seek their input. This year, of course, since there weren't multiple requests that needed to be ranked in any way, they didn't do that part. But with respect to the Ark fee, there were no comments, there was no input, and there were no questions to me about that particular recommendation. And so I gave them adequate time to give me some feedback, and there was none. It seemed like they were pleased, or at least understood, not necessarily pleased, but understood the rationale behind that particular increase. By the way, I also made sure to share with them that there were concerns expressed about the 99-cent portion of the request, and that some of those concerns had to do with why weren't there other alternative revenue streams being explored, or had we looked closely enough at ensuring that there was optimal efficiency with respect to the current funding that's being used. So I did voice those concerns that were raised by us at our first meeting. Again, having heard all that, there were no comments and no input from them about that particular fee. Then I presented the technology fee decrease amount. Again, for all the reasons that we discussed, I laid it out to them why that was an important, or that this board felt it was an important reduction to make. And I did receive two questions about that particular decrease. One question came from the Dean of the College of Engineering, Dr. Calarachi, and then it was followed by Dean Cole from the library, the Dean of the Library. And their question was, will reducing the fee by the $1.60, will that impact the funding for any of the other labs on campus? And I said to them, as I understand it, that $1.60 amount, and Cooper, if this is incorrect, I can go back and correct this with him, but that $1.60 amount and the annual revenue of $57,600 was a direct calculation from taking the old main computer lab offline, and that it would not affect or impact the revenue stream for any of the other labs. Perfect. So having said that, again, I opened the floor and asked them if they had any other questions, concerns, comments, input that they wanted to share. Shared with them the straw poll vote outcome, and there were no other comments, no other input, no other questions. And that's my report from the University Executive Committee.
Thank you, Dr. Morales. Just one more thing I'd mention, and just if you want to add anything to, so our university student fees were recently audited. I had a chance to review the audit in the summer, and it was pretty clear that we already have so many avenues in place for students to learn about student fees, access the resources that their student fees provide, and we do an incredible job of being transparent. There were a few areas, recommendations that were made to improve, and those have already been taken into account this year. Yeah, I guess, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, and I just want to add that with what Dr. Morales said. Utah State University is probably the clear example within the state of how to be good stewards over fees. And we both had a chance to review the audit, and we were exemplary. Us and another institution was also audited, and we were by far stellar. So we just want to, I guess, we can thank the administration for giving us this opportunity, and also for keeping an accountable record of what's going on. So it's good to get input. Sorry, we're passing COVID over here.
All right, we'll move into the discussion on the Ark Fee Increase. As was recommended at the end of our last meeting, if you had any questions on the Ark Fee, to reach out to Daniel in specific, or do your own research. So I guess before opening up the conversation, I wanted to ask, maybe just by raise of hand, were any of you able to meet with Daniel individually or contact him between now and our last meeting? Okay. Thank you. And let's go ahead and open up the discussion on the Ark Fee Increase. So please state your name and your title, I guess, at the start of at the beginning of your comment, and make sure to speak in the mic and speak clearly. As well, I'm going to ask that you begin your comment with stating your position on the fee increase. So I support this fee increase because, or am in opposition to this fee increase because. So.
Senator Hodge, I am in agreement to this fee. I support it. I had the opportunity to talk to my council about it, and they all unanimously agreed that they think it would be a good idea to raise it to keep it going, like renovations and stuff like that, and making sure it's upkept.
Porter Kasdorf, a VP over student events. I'm in support of this fee with the stipulation that if there is any other shutdowns caused by COVID, that students will have a say whether or not the Ark will be able to stay open or its hours and such.
So those attending virtually through Zoom just need to, if they have questions or comments to contribute to our discussion, need to type it in the chat, and then Sammy will read that. And we have one coming through Zoom. That's what we're waiting on up here.
Okay. We have Chad Withers. He's a student at large. And he's a grad student in the College of Engineers, and he wants to state that he opposes the fee increase. So, no other explanation.
Jen Haas, Student Advocate VP. I oppose the fee. I personally have talked to some of my neighbors and some other students that aren't with involvement. And I just think it's unfair to put this deficit of funding on students for a mistake and a promise that the leaders in 2015 couldn't keep up. And I just think we should really try harder to find other alternatives to make up for that deficit before putting it on students that didn't really have a say in 2015.
I'll just comment one thing on that. When I met with Daniel, I asked him to explain that a little bit more, and he explained that all budgets are really allocated and created based on projections. So the student fee, the way I understand it, the student fee, or the Ark student fee was created before construction on the Ark began, and so it has stayed the same number, and that fee number was based off projections for the bond payment, projections for how much upkeep would cost, and just those projections were short, and that's what this deficit is coming to, and each student fee dollar comes up to about it's about $33,000, correct me if I'm wrong, so times that by 6.5, I think I am in support of this fee, in that I don't know if fundraising efforts could cover that deficit, or should be expected to be hoisted upon the Ark.
Okay, we have another Zoom comment from Chad Withers, again, student at large. And his statement with the fee, which he earlier opposed, is less people are using the Ark with COVID, and the Logan Canyon is a great place for recreation. We also have the blacksmith for a canyon, so that is his statement on that.
Liz Drake, Education Senator. I'm in support of this fee, and I did contact Daniel and ask him about this, and one thing that I asked for was if he had those projections for the future and how his budget would change. with that $6.50 increase, and I was disappointed to not receive that in return. But it doesn't change my stance on it. I just would like to see maybe that worked on in the future and see that they can produce those projections, because I work with the bus fee, and they have 10, 15-year projections that are really, really neat to look at and really help you understand why they charge what they do and what they're planning to do with it. And I just think that if students could see an image like that for the ARC, it would be really helpful. But the way I see it with this fee, we can continue to charge students the same thing, and if we try to find alternate funding, we limit how much they can use the ARC. And so they're being charged the same thing, and they get less out of it. And they have cut hours, and students lose jobs, and what they can get out of this with their fee is not the same. Or we can increase their fee and continue to serve them in the same way that we have. And to me, that seems like a better option.
Okay, motion to exhaust the speaker list. Okay. Any further discussions?
I guess to encourage the ARC to be more efficient and also plan a little bit for the future, I would be interested in, instead of giving them $6.50 in an increase, where, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me, Chair, if the $5.50 was for the bond payment and then the dollar was to cover future projection expenses to create a fund, to essentially, I would like to change, maybe instead of $1 in student fees to 50 cents, and then give the ARC the opportunity to look for that 50 cents per student in being more efficient in how they operate the ARC expenses. So that's my 2 cents, and I'd like to make a proposal to alter the student fee increase to $6 flat.
Oh, second it. I second that, yeah.
We just make a motion to vote on it, I guess. So the motion is to vote on that proposal, correct, Cooper? All right. All in favor of voting on the proposal? This will come after the vote on the initial proposal. Is that fine? Okay. So, and we have to motion, yeah, we just discussed. Okay, further discussion on that proposal. Let's go to
Senator Hodge, I just want to say that Senator Karras' idea, I think that's a really, really good idea, because like Senator Drake said, I worked on the Transportation Committee last year and saw all their projections. I think it's a really good idea to see like a good compromise, I guess, to say, because we're still giving them some of the money, but then we're still trying to see what they're going to do with it exactly and where else they can pull funds from.
Okay. I personally would oppose going to $6 flat, and I think we should keep the $6.50, only because this extra allocated amount needs to be significant enough that for any further expenses moving forward, it should totally be covered by it instead of them having to come back in the future and ask for more. So I think we should give enough room for extra repairs or other projections that might come, and give them wiggle room instead of cutting that in half. So that's where I stand on that.
I apologize. My first comment, I didn't say that I was Senator Karras from the College of Engineering. So again, this is Senator Karras from the College of Engineering. And in rebuttal to that, President Ahmed, I would say this, if there is not a projection why it was necessarily 99 cents, yes, that would give them quite the buffer, but I would be more confident in 99 cents, well, $1 increase if they had the projections as to why it's $1. And the 50 cents to me gives them the opportunity to create a fund, and then also to look to create that 50 cents per student in other ways, ergo being more efficient in how they were with their fees. In consequence, I think some of our discussion last time was there was comments brought up about concerns about how the student fee is being used currently. And this way, the bond payment would be met, so that way they wouldn't have to look for major changes to like Ark hours, but maybe there's ways that they could come up with that 50 cents, especially if it's a hypothetical where they haven't given us a reason why those projections are the way that they are.
I am tempted to agree with Sammy and Austin Fullerton, Cass Senator, by the way. I agree with Sammy's comments based on, I have full confidence in our checks and balances system. I think that what we talked about in the beginning of the meeting, that what Sammy had talked about in the beginning of the meeting, that we have already proven, our university has proven that our administration is capable of making sure that our funds are being allocated to the right places for the right reasons, with the students' well-being in mind. So I agree with the fee increase based on that if it is an excess in the future, I have full confidence in an administration to shut that down, decrease that fee if it is in an excess fund. So for that reason, that's exactly why I would 100% have full confidence in the fee increase and the administration to do the checks and balance later.
I'm going to go ahead and make a comment really quick. Is that okay? I think, so when I met with Daniel, the 99 cents in debate right now could be, or well, I guess first I would add to Austin's comment that there is a policy board in place, a student policy board already in place. So while our faith, yes, is in administration's good judgment and character as well, students would have a say there as well. And going over with Daniel's, the unforeseen costs and how big those really are, how much it really costs to replace a broken window pane or an outdoor bathroom or just broken equipment. That 99 cents wasn't arrived on without a lot of thought. And I think we can also assume that measures are already being taken to reduce, to cut costs with, personnel changes, and other method or other measures being taken to reduce costs. Okay, go ahead, Rachel.
My name is Rachel Arner, and I am the PR and Marketing Director. I'm finding myself agreeing with Senator Karras on the fact that I have stressed this in the past meeting, but I'll say it again. Due to the apparent inefficiency I've seen over the last 3.5 years, I was hesitant to agree to this bill, although I do want to see the Ark functioning for the best for the students. So I'm agreeing with Senator Karras on this, that the 50 cents taken off makes a lot of sense to me.
Sammy, did you want to speak, or were you just pointing things out? You're just sharing.
I'm keeping a speakers list, so if you guys can raise your hands when I'm looking in your general direction so I can keep it here. But I did want to make a comment as to the 99 cents earlier. The initial increase was supposed to be $3 more than it is, and Daniel had a discussion with me, and we felt like $3 would be way too much, but $1 increase on for any other unforeseen costs would be an appropriate projection. So there was a compromise there from the initial proposed amount. As you can see, being around, I think, $35,000 or so per dollar increase, $3 or $4 in additional to the break-even point would have been way too much. So there has been some give and take and compromise. So that history might be a good context to have.
Senator Karras, College of Engineering. To Senator Flinton's remarks, I too have a tremendous amount of trust in administration. My experiences with Gary Egbert and the technology fee, which we will later discuss, shows that Gary Egbert took the opportunity to notice that the student fee could potentially decrease. And looking in your student fee binders, I think it's hard to find other examples of fee administrators who are willing to give up those forms of budget. And essentially, if we do have to come back to this meeting, to me, the effort of this body increasing the student fee if we have to, I think is a more worthwhile cause than increasing it now when we didn't have to. And those students would be at an expense. And so until I think we have a more clear reason why that fund needs to be at that amount, when that fund is being created, it didn't exist until potentially now after we vote on this. Then I think we can look into more reasoning and hypotheticals about maybe amount. So I think to me this is a good compromise where it gives the ARC an opportunity to be more efficient. And if we do need to increase this another 50 cents next year, to me that's not a bad thing. Like they would show that need and we would cover that cost. But to me, if we extend that now, we have the concern where we don't really ever get that money back. I think Gary Egbert is the exception to the rule and not the standard when it comes to student fees.
VP Kazor, Student Events. Just looking at the numbers a little bit, we have $283,000 roughly for this total operating expense. Being at that 99 cents would bring us roughly $30,000. That is about a 15% increase towards this total operating expense. Now being the 50 cents per is obviously half that, that being roughly 7.5%. I don't know what the increasing annual costs are going to bring. I don't feel like they're going to be more than 15%, maybe let alone 7.5%, let alone 15%.
Yeah, we'll hear from Senator Hardcastle next.
Thank you. I am Senator Hardcastle. With the reminder to everyone that I am the representative for the Ark fee, I can assure you that I went through these funds as well with Daniel to make sure that things were being allocated correctly and efficiently as possible. And I have confidence in the numbers that he provided with me, as with his intent with being responsible with student funds. So just wanted to solidify that. I've looked over some things that might have been questioning for other people. I asked him those questions when we were together in our meeting. So if there were further concerns, you can feel free to contact me with them. But just with regards to that, I do have confidence in how he allocates our money. And while I wouldn't be opposed to looking to see if the 99 cents could be reduced, I know that there was thought and energy put into making sure that that was a correct indicator on how much we should be spending. And I disagree with coming up with an arbitrary projection of 50 cents. I would like, if we decide to reduce it, I would rather that it be a more thought out projection rather than just a number that we come up with in this room. Thank you.
Next we'll hear from VP Wilkie.
Trevor Wilkie, VP Athletics and Campus Recreation. I stand for the original fee increase, and in rebuttal to Director Arner, I think that looking at this in the long term from what we've discussed previously, we need to look at the long-term mitigation of the risk that we're about to face. I know that if we were to project this over the 10 years with that $35,000 that the 99 cents increases to, over the 10 years, that's about $350,000, right? That's for any risk and also any money that can be directly poured into that quasi-fund account, which we do remember we need to replenish for the 10 years as well when it comes to have the fields of the legacy fields renewed again. So aside from that, I almost would agree with President Ahmed, where if there was the higher fund, it almost would be certain to make sure to keep that open for students in the future. That's something that we have agreed on. And in order for us to be able to beat the long term and to be able to save up and replenish that account, we have to also account for the money that we have lost from that quasi account because of, the bond payments. And so there's a lot of factors that go into this, and 99 cents, I think, for providing services like the field and to replenish everything else that we're doing, I think that it's a small factor that students can pay.
Okay. We have two people on the speakers list. The first one is Chad Withers, student at large, joining us over Zoom, adding further comments to his initial opposition is campuses in other parts of the country would be astounded to have a tenth of the outdoor recreation opportunities we have out the back door. I don't think the Ark does much at all for off-campus students. There isn't a decent parking close to the Ark. I can't support the Ark unless the parking is improved. We can't keep spending money like this and M&Ms and then passing it off onto students, many of whom are in a financial pickle. If it was up to me, I would sell the Ark. So.
Yeah, okay. Senator Hodge, Chat Senator. I just had a couple questions for President Ahmed. So how did you guys go about discussing the fee increase from $3 back down to $1? Like, how did you guys come up with that projection?
So initially, before Daniel did a lot of the projections, we were assuming the increase was only going to be around $3. And we had this similar idea of going around $6 to cover any additional expenses that might arise. So the biggest thing we discussed were things like the heating system and things like that that can go out that are several $1,000s. I think he said, that could be 40,000 or so, somewhere around there. And then once Daniel went back and did all the calculation, it ended up being that 551, I believe. When he said that, and initially was to go $3 beyond the break-even point. So I told him that would be way too much to ask students to go $3, especially once we discovered that $1 is equivalent to, I think, was $36,000. So an appropriate one might be to go $1 above. $36,000 seems like a lot to us when we are in college, but for just giant systemic things that go on with the school, that's really nothing. So just $1 additionally, looking at things that can break down, like a heating system or other just wear and tear things, felt like that would be an enough amount to give him enough to save up over the years. So that's kind of where we came from, is Daniel, once I explained to him $3 would be way too much to ask students, he was willing to he just asked me where the idea should be, and I asked him to come up with a realistic expectation, and I actually said more than he did. He went to 99 cents. I was a little higher than he suggested.
All right, hey, thank you.
Okay. I just have a couple points of information. First of all, just to piggyback on what President Ahmed said about expenses for specific, items, systems, especially in buildings. About 5 years ago, a chiller went out in this building, this building is not connected to the rest of the heating and chilling system of the campus, unfortunately because of its age. But a chiller went out, and we were thinking, $50,000 or so. When we got the price tag on it, it was $250,000 to replace one of the 2 chillers in this building. These are pretty significant costs, right? Now, the Ark is a newer building, of course, and so hopefully we don't have those kinds of expenses too soon, but at some point they will come. They will come. So I think, again, just keep that in mind. These expenses are not easy to come up with without building some sort of reserves. And we build that reserve for this building, so we had the money to do that, and we didn't have to come back to students and ask for that money. The second point of information gets back to Chad's point about parking for the Ark. We built the Ark specifically without parking. Do you want to know why? There's 2 very important reasons. One is that building is all about wellness. The last thing you need to do to get to that building is to drive to it, right? We want you to walk, we want you to run, we want you to ride your bikes, ride your scooter, do something else, but don't drive to that building. Number 2 related to that is, so if we had put more parking in the middle of campus, what would that have done to our congestion problem? What would that have done to our air quality problem? The Ark is a wellness building. It's not supposed to contribute to those problems. So we specifically did not build it with parking for those reasons.
Seeing no further comments, we will vote on Senator Kara's motion to vote on a new proposal, which is $6. So just to clarify, if this motion passes, then we will vote on the $6 proposal. So all in favor of this motion, raise your hand. And if you're on Zoom, vote as well.
Yes, I have that.
All right, there were 11 votes in favor of this motion, so the motion fails. So now we will move to the original proposal for $6.50. We can just go ahead and vote on that, right? We don't have to. All right, so I'll entertain a motion to vote on this proposal. Okay.
Abstentions counted. So abstentions count as a no vote. Yes.
Should we take the names and we could finish the vote? I mean, it'll just be the same as old. We don't have to. All right, so the motion was moved. We'll go ahead and, so all in favor of voting on the original proposal, raise your hand. The motion passes. We'll go ahead and, so all in favor of the $6.50 increase to the Ark fee, please raise your hand. All in opposition to this proposal? And did anybody abstain? The motion passes. All right, we'll move to the discussion on the technology fee decrease. We'll open up the floor for that. I'll entertain a motion to go ahead and vote on the fee decrease. So moved from Jen. Second, okay. All in support of the technology fee decrease, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the room. Any in opposition? Any abstentions? Great. Well, thank you again for the time you've dedicated to this and the thoughtfulness, and I feel that we've had constructive discussions, and this concludes the Student Fee Board. Thank you again. Let's have a round of applause.